Ngayong binabalot tayo ng dilim at pangamba,
Sabay-sabay ang pagkatok ng mga tanong na,
kaya pa ba?
saan ba tayo pupunta? May pag-asa pa ba?
Sa gitna ng lahat ng agam-agam, may mga bagay tayong muling natuklasan. Wala palang pagsubok ang makakatalo sa tatag ng ating nagkakaisang puso.
Nananalig, nagmamalasakit, nagbabayanihan,
Nagmamahal sa bayan,
sa kalikasan,
sa kalusugan,
sa pamilya.
at sa kapwa.
Kaya anumang pagsubok ang kakaharapin,
Umasang may magandang bukas para sa atin.
at pagkatapos ng lahat ng ito, sama-sama tayong tatayo.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our fourth Livable Cities Lab. I'm Guillermo Luz, Chairman of the Livable Cities Challenge, Chief Resilience Officer of the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation, and Associate Director at Ayala Corporation. I will be your host and moderator for today. Let me start by acknowledging and welcoming the mayors who join us today in this Livable Cities Lab. We have Mayor Andrea Inares from Antipolo City, Mayor Lani Revilla from Bacoor City, Mayor Nico Yulo from Bago City, Negros Occidental, Mayor Francis Anthony Garcia from Balanga City, Bataan, Mayor Eric Singson from Candon City, Ilocos Sur, Vice Mayor Maria Rosario Nice from City of San Fernando, La Union, Mayor Lourdes Katakis from San Pedro City, Laguna, Mayor Arlene Arcillas from Santa Rosa City, Laguna, Mayor Webster Letargo from Cumaca, Quezon, Mayor Richard Gomez from Ormoc City, Leyte, Mayor Russell Plato from Santa Maria, Bulacan, Mayor Maria Gina Lizares from Sipalay City, Negros Occidental, Mayor Juan Carlo Medina from Vigan City, Ilocos Sur, Mayor Nacional Mercado from Maasin City, Mayor Manuel Saladaga from Mahayag, Zamboanga del Sur, and Mayor Sammy Ko from Pagadian City, also in Zamboanga del Sur. Welcome, mayors, and thank you for joining us and taking time out from your busy schedules. I hope you find this particular lab extremely useful for your work as mayors and as local chief executives. And thank you to all of you for taking the time to join us in this webinar. So the Livable Cities Challenge and the League of Cities of the Philippines, in partnership with Globe Telecom, are pleased to present the Livable Cities Labs, a series of webinar sessions to deliver information, knowledge, ideas, insights for better solutions for your city. As we move towards a digital age, data will fuel better planning and informed decisions. Data plays an important role, especially in local governments. It allows chief executives and managers to design better solutions, gain insights in delivering and enhancing services, formulate policies, and improve accountability and understanding of local operations. This fourth Livable Cities Lab will focus on Data Analytics 101, the value and use of data for managing LGUs. The discussion will revolve around the importance of collecting timely and quality data, analytics, and the value of data science for cities. We've assembled a great panel of data science experts and institutions which collect data on cities to help them build up capacity for planning and designing of city services. As we proceed, please feel free to type in your questions in the Q&A box on Zoom or in the comments section of Facebook Live so we can properly queue your questions for the panel discussions later on. Please be reminded that this webinar will be recorded and a copy of the recording will be made available after the session. All presentations will also be made available and shared with participants after the session is over, so you won't need to keep on taking pictures of the screen to catch up with all the slides. Now, When we start each session, we're going to be seeding a poll question to the audience during the webinar, and you will see these poll questions pop up before every set of speakers. And these questions will allow us to better interact with you. So let's have a look and let's take a look at the very first poll question. Okay, so please pick just one answer. Where are you joining us from? Luzon, Metro Manila, Visayas, or Mindanao? We'll give you about 15 seconds, 10 to 15 seconds to answer. Where are you joining us from? Luzon, Metro Manila, Visayas, Mindanao. Okay, so here are the responses. As expected, the bulk of the audience comes from Luzon, both for Luzon and Metro Manila, which is 3/4 of the audience. We'll have 13% from Visayas and 11% from Mindanao. So that's typically our audience numbers every lab, every 2 weeks when we run the lab. Okay, so our next question, and this will help us get started on the first session. Does your LGU have an integrated database management system in place? Yes, no, or I don't know. Okay, let me repeat that. Does your LGU have an integrated database management system in place? Yes, no, or I don't know. Okay, well, I don't know wins 40%. Yes with 32% and no with 28%. So clearly there's a lot of work to do here in terms of collecting timely data, integrating a database for the city, and then using it for analytics, and then preparing dashboards. And that's what today's lab is all about. How to collect the data, process, analyze it, present it on dashboards or maps, and make use of this data for managing your city or making your city a better place. So let's start with our very first session. And this question, I guess, will really be, directly addressed by this first pair of speakers. So for this presentation, let me introduce you to Brody Sapno. Brody graduated from Ateneo Graduate School of Business and joined the League of Cities of the Philippines in 2010 as a program officer for management information systems. He leads the League's city database project and is also involved in other projects that involve data collection. He will be joined by Soleil Manzano. She joined the League of Cities of the Philippines in 2017 as a program officer for special projects. Her work focuses on program development and management. She leads the League's city database project. She's a licensed environmental planner and has been working in the development sector for 8 years now. She's a graduate of the University of the Philippines, Tiliman. So let's, for a presentation on the League of Cities experience towards creating data-driven cities, let's please welcome Brody and Soleil.
Okay. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Let me just share my screen. There. So hi, good afternoon. My name is Brody Sapno. I'm the program officer for the Management Information System of the League of Cities of the Philippines. Today we will present towards data-driven cities, the LCP database experience. For a brief background of the project, the city database started in 2018. And in 2019, headed by our national president, Mayor Bing, saw the importance of data in cities. So with the help of the National Executive Board, the project was continued as a flagship project of the LCP. The main objectives of the project is first to gather data on the city level, and of course get data from the secondary data from the national government agency. These data, which are available online to our cities, is then turned into information that will support our policy and legislation papers. Also, aside from that, the project also aims to partner with different partners, with different development partners that will create projects that will benefit our cities. And most important, since our data came from our cities, it is also our aim to promote city-to-city cooperation by sharing LGU experiences and practices that will provide solutions to the challenges that cities face. For the data collection, we sent survey tools to 15 offices in the LGU. 13 of these offices are under the LGU, while the two offices, the PNP and the BFP, are under DILG. On the average, we have 60% response rate from our cities, but the project is still ongoing, and we are hoping that we could get more responses in the future. For the list of available data, here are just some data that we get from the offices. For example, for the City Planning and Development Office, we get the local development plans like the CLUP, CDP, and the IT-related systems like the GIS and the database, if they have. And then for the DRM, like the hazards present in the city, and the DRM facilities like evacuation centers or command centers. And then another is the Department of, for the City Health Office, we also get the number of hospitals and and then the city-run health facilities like TB dots, social hygiene clinics, HIV care treatment centers, drug rehab centers, etc., etc. And of course, for the two offices that are not under the LGU, it's the police and the BFP. We have the number of police and fire station and crime statistics. And then in addition to that, we also gather data from the gender development. This is funded by the Embassy of Canada. And here we get data from the GAD plan and budget and other information about the GAD focal point system. And this is the secondary data that we have. This is data that we get from the national government. So this is just a few: the Department of Finance, the Department of Health, SHED, PSA, COMELEC, and so on and so forth. If we see the need to gather more data from the national government agency, we try to request data from them so that we can include it in our database. Overall, we estimate that the project or the city database project have more than 10,000 data points. And in addition to that, we also have qualitative data, which is more important because this is where we get the actual LGU experiences. There are times that sometimes that data doesn't reflect on the actual situation of what is happening in the city. So this is where the LGU experiences plays a huge role in terms of giving meaning to the situation. And for some initial insights in our database, here you can see the 2017 and 2018 era dependency of cities. We extracted the top 10 cities, which are least era dependent, and some era data of some cities that are registered here today. Please take note that we exclude the Metro Manila cities due to their special characteristics. But this data is composed of the light blue bar is the era, the dark blue is the locally sourced revenue, and the yellow part is the share from the national tax. Here you can see that most of the numbers or most of the era dependency of the top 10 is not that huge, except for in 2018, Candon was included in the 2018 era dependency top 10. This is mainly because they got a huge share from the national tax, and this is due to the tobacco excise tax they got in 2018. But if we check the highest difference in terms of percentage, that will be Vigan City with about 11% difference from 2017 to 2018. And if we take a look into vegan more closely and then check the locally sourced revenue, the next slide, we found out that in 2017, vegan got collected 22.9 million in terms of RPT and 40.2 million in terms of business tax. But in 2018, because they have initiatives to increase their RPT collection and their business tax, the collection increased to 30.6 for the RPT and almost double for the business tax to 79.4. So here we can see if cities want to have, or if cities want to be less dependent on their ERA, these are some initiatives that cities can look into and in terms of ERA dependency. Another findings that we have is the scheduled market value of cities. Please take note that for this presentation, we only got the year of the reported latest update. We are still ongoing with the data collection for the year of implementation of the update, because these two are two different things. But again, just for this presentation, we want to show the average RPT collection based on the previous year and the year of the updated valuation. So for example, like Marikina, if Marikina updated their SMB in 2005, we compared it in their 2004 RPT collection. So we got all those data and then averaged it, and we found out that based on the previous year, the RPT collection increased by 23%. Please also note that we are also doing more research about this topic because, again, the implementation and the updating are two different things. And we want to talk to our cities to give us more insights about this topic, and especially now that there is a proposed Valuation Reform Act. And then for the population and land area, we have the total. We have the total population based from PSA. Based on PSA, we have in 2015 we almost have around 100 million, and 41 million those resides in cities, and that is about 40.7%. But in the land area, the total land area of the Philippines is 300,000 square kilometers. And if we total all the land area of Philippine cities, it will just equals to 38,186 square kilometers. So here you can see there's so many people living in so little space. So here the green part is the municipalities, and the red up to the pink color are the highly urbanized ICC and component cities. Then here we got the enrolled 4Ps from the DSWD data in 2020, and we compare it to the number of households. Here we have a difficulty because the definition of families and household is not the same. So, but again, just for presentation, we just want to compare these two and just see how many 4Ps are enrolled in cities. And for the number in 2015, the total number of households in the whole country is 22.9 million. And out of those 22.9, around 9.5 million are in cities. And in this 9.9 million, around 1.1 families are enrolled in 4Ps. And to make it simpler, we do some math, and it turns out that 1 out of 9 families resides in cities are enrolled in 4Ps. But this is, well then, to some LGUs, to some cities, this is not the same because based from our validation, LGU have their own poverty data. Means that they have their own list of families that they think that they think should be included in the 4Ps. But during our validation, DSWD also go down to that city and then also have their validation. So I think this is where the disconnect between the national and the local government, because somehow the national doesn't really trust the LGU data in terms of this aspect. But again, we think this could be verified more, and more research should be uh, gone through this, and hopefully in the next presentation that we will have in the future, maybe we should have more data about this one. And then now, especially now with the COVID cases, these are the number of hospitals in the Philippine cities. So in total, we have 833 hospitals that are in cities. And out of those 833, 622 are private, 83 are the national hospitals or are run by the DOH, and 71 are provincial, and 57 are LGU managed hospital, but are located in just 47 cities, which means there are cities which have one or more city-run hospital. And then for the last part, let me just bring you to our COVID city tracker and COVID city stats. This is what we're doing, and we are updating this every day. Here is the LGU initiatives about COVID. So here we can see the different LGUs and their initiatives about COVID. So this is about education, testing, facilities, etc., etc. And the other database that we have is the COVID-19 cases. So here we can sort cities or region or provinces in terms of COVID cases. So here's a summary of the COVID cases. So right now, for the Philippine cities, again, well, and this is based on DOH data as of September 1. There might be a difference between the DOH data and LGU data. So, but because it's very hard to get LGU data all at once, so we just get the DOH. So at the moment, we have 161,597 COVID cases in Philippine cities, and that is around 72% of the total cases. So here we can see the recovered cases, the patients, the COVID-19 cases that died, and active cases. And here you can see some status of cases and the timeline in terms of the number of cases per day. So please, if you have time for cities, if you have time, please free to visit this page so that, and if you want to input data to this one, please let us know so that we could include it in our database. And for the second half of my, and for the second half of the presentation, my colleague Soleil will present on how the League utilized data from the City Database Project.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Brody. So as mentioned by my colleague, I am Soleil from the League of Cities of the Philippines. And for this part of the presentation, I'll be sharing how the League made sense of the data gathered through the City Database Project since 2018. So next slide, please. Yeah, so for this slide, you will see that there are 4 areas wherein the League made sense of the data. So for the first one, for informed policymaking, so the data gathered from the database project helped make the policy papers, the policy briefs, and policy researches become evidence-based. So for 2020, these include policy papers, among others, articulated in various national government agency meetings, technical working groups, and these sectors include the environment, business, education, and even during the COVID-19 pandemic, data gathered from this database became helpful, especially the socioeconomic profile of cities became helpful for the league in asserting recommendations to the national government in terms of the rollout of the social amelioration program in the past months. So for the second one, for innovative project development. So the use of city profiles and local city data has become very useful in developing project proposals and concept notes. So the use of these data ensure that the proposed interventions complement the needs and issues of cities. It also became helpful in formulating selection criteria when we look for the pilot size or target areas, and of course in organizing scoping missions with these target cities. So for the third one, for meaningful partnership and collaboration, so the database has ignited interest from both private and development sector partners to work with the league. So one example that I can cite is we were able to work with UNDP in their SDG related initiative. So they have consulted with the league in terms of that initiative. I think that they will present later. And another one with the private sector, of course, is like this one. The league has partnered with the Liveable Cities Challenge for this series of webinars and other offline activities that were put off because of the pandemic. Apart from that, the league has worked with other partners such as the World Bank and other USAID contractors and partners for potential technical assistance to cities. So for the fourth one, the most important one for us is the help in the city-to-city cooperation. So the data that we've gathered became helpful in matching of cities for benchmarking activities. Now we have the profiles. We can easily compare and find similarities among cities. So the city-to-city cooperation became helpful in disseminating the best practices that we've gathered from the ground. So next slide, please. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so basically, this is how the league put these data to good use. And now that we've showed you a glimpse into how the city database project has impacted the league's work. Now, if we were to describe the data and data management in cities, we can say that cities are sources of robust data. So cities and other local governments have various ways of data collection on the ground. So data can be collected at the barangay level, at the city level, and of course, cities and municipalities can also liaise with other national government agencies for data requests. So in relation to the robustness of data found in local governments, this data, however, most of them are still in paper form, so and not yet digitized. So you can find them organized in binders, in filing cabinets. So it will be challenging if you will be searching for a particular data for a specific year. So you'll have to go through all these piles of paper. And in relation to that, data still in paper forms, data management is still in silo. So if you're looking for a specific data, definitely the clue to that is this data related to this office? For example, is the data you're looking for business data? You'll find it in the business permit and licensing office, such as that. So there's no consolidated management of data yet. But apart from these areas for improvement and observations that we saw, there is a huge potential for data analysis because, as mentioned, data from local governments are coming from various sources, and this can be homogenized for optimal use and development planning. So, but for not, for the next slide, you will see that there are cities that have already invested in data management and have already made good use of their data. So one example that I'm proud to share is the experience of Tagum City in Davao del Norte. So the city has employed the use of CBMS for its local data gathering. So they've used this data in developing their comprehensive development plan. And apart from that, the GIS feature of the CBMS has helped them in identifying and planning for the city's future proposed expansion areas. So as you'll see in the screen, Tagum City has identified other CBDs and growth centers. Another city that has made good use of their data management system is Baybay City in Leyte. So the Barangay Management Information System is an alternative to the CBMS. So the BMIS was developed by a university, UP Los Baños. They partnered with the Visayas State University, or VSU, located in Baybay. Then eventually, VSU liaised with Baybay, the local government of Baybay, to employ this BMIS. The purpose of Baybay City in employing the BMIS is to actually come up with an accurate data banking system that is sex disaggregated. And every year, the local government updates the data management system according to the data gaps that they find. And the database, the BMIS of Baybay, is so comprehensive that they also have data on families with medicinal plants in their backyard. And another relevance of the BMIS of Baybay during the COVID pandemic was became useful in prioritizing barangays to be provided with relief packs according to their socioeconomic profile and income as well. So another use of the BMIS during the COVID was for contact tracing. Okay, so sorry, back to the previous slide. Ayan. So as you'll see in your screen, these are just examples of data that the Baybay apply, examples of plans, I'm so sorry. These are some of the plans that Baybay City was able to apply the data that they have collected. So the CDP, contingency plan, DRR plan, gender and development plan, executive, legislative agenda, among others. So next slide, please. All right, so now that we were able to share our first-hand experience in the conduct of the LCPC database project and illustrate how robust the data is in cities and how high the potential for this data to fuel cities to become data-driven and eventually smart, we would like to encourage cities and local governments alike to, first, of course, the most crucial one is to collect and consolidate data, because without data, there will be no database system for the city. Second, start simple. So the database system doesn't have to be sophisticated or grand at first. You can use your Excel or the Google platform in the beginning. But better to utilize available technology if you have an access to that technology. And the third one, invest in data management system and data analytics. So when we say data management system and data analytics, it includes manpower, the system, the software, and the equipment. And fourth one, ensure data quality, integrity, and consistency. So I would like to underscore data quality because it's pointless to use inaccurate and inconsistent data in planning, because data must reflect the realities of the local government. Sabi nga, garbage in, garbage out. So to wrap up my presentation, I would like to emphasize that for cities to become smart, this requires not only data, but connectivity as well. So thank you very much, and over to you, Bill.
Thank you, Brody and Soleil. Getting this lab off to a great start with your presentation and what you've done for cities. And I can see it's generated so many questions already. So I would encourage our panelists to answer the questions when you have the time on the Q&A box rather than wait until the end. because we may not have time to answer all of the questions. So please start answering them on the Q&A box when you can. But that we're off to a great start. Now let's shift gears a bit and still looking at data for cities, but let's begin to look at data, same city data, but on sustainable development goals. So before we start on the topic of SDGs, let me go back to the poll question and ask our audience on how many sustainable development goals do you think there are? How many SDGs do we have? When I say we, globally, it's a UN measure, no? So are there 15, 17, 20, or 100 SDGs? How many SDGs do we have? 15, 17, 20, or 100? Okay, can we see the responses? Okay, wow, congratulations. Almost 2/3 have picked out the correct answer, 17 SDGs. 23% thought there were 20, 9% thought there were 15, and 7% thought there were 100. But there are 17 is the correct answer. So thank you for that. So as I mentioned, this next pair of speakers will talk about how to measure SDGs for cities. It's typically measured for countries, but I think this is a landmark project because it's going to begin to measure city performance or municipal performance for SDGs. So let me go on and introduce our next team of speakers. Our first speaker, and they're both from UNDP, is Yemi Werki. She's a senior policy advisor at UNDP Philippines. Under this role, she heads the Impact Advisory Team, which is responsible for policy research, partnerships, and pipeline development, and which also houses the Accelerator Lab and Pintig Lab, which is the Data Innovation Lab of UNDP Philippines. Prior to this, she worked as economics advisor in UNDP Uganda, Rwanda, Gambia, so all in Africa, heading strategic and advisory units. She will be joined in this presentation by Francis Capistrano. He is UNDP Philippines Accelerator Lab's head of experimentation. Capi helps design and implement experiments on frontier development areas such as civic action against poverty, marine litter, and sustainable cities. He also dabbles in data innovation, helping to set up the Pintig Lab. Capi was formerly a journalist and brings his core skills of asking questions, interrogating and questioning assumptions, and telling stories into public sector management reform and innovation, knowledge management, and strategic communication. Prior to taking on the head of experimentation of UNDP's Accelerator Lab, he served as project coordinator of the NEDA UNDP Strategic M&E project and was senior project officer of the DepEd UNDP computerization project. So to discuss sustainable city goals for LGUs, let's please welcome Yemi and Capi.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me take this opportunity to thank the organizers for really putting together this important webinar on digitalization and data for cities. We are very much delighted to be here. All protocols duly observed. I would just try and reflect a little bit on the Sustainable Development Goals and the Agenda 2030. And then my colleague will come in and complement me later. But let me also say thank you very much for asking that important question. Who knows about SDGs? Delighted that at least 62% has answered that correctly, but I wouldn't take it for granted that not everybody knows SDGs. So we still have a lot of work to do. That said, allow me to reflect quickly on the Sustainable Development Agenda, Agenda 2013, what that agenda is all about. It is one of the most transformative and ambitious agenda agreed 5 years ago by Philippines and other 192 countries, which encompasses social, economic, and environmental goals, which are 17 in number. So the world has been quite on track in trying to deliver these goals. Philippines, on its part, has embedded these goals into its National Development Plan, PDP, which began implementation in 2017 to 2022, as you all know. And many of the local governments were localizing these sustainable development goals and then implementing them well ahead on track before 2020, of course. And we reported already twice in the high-level political forum in UN. Now, since 2020, early January, a lot has happened in our court. COVID-19 has, the pandemic has, the outbreak of the pandemic has changed significantly the way we do a lot of things. Amongst them, there is significant regression, unprecedented in human development since the measure has begun. And a lot of suspicions that we will be regressing in many of the sustainable development goals in delivering them by 2030. So data become extremely important for all of us in delivering this agenda. And it's not only important for us to look at data now in its accuracy, quality, and so forth, not only to monitor the progress in SDGs, it has become more important for all of us to monitor data for development planning, for investment, public investments, and so forth. You would notice that data has been playing a critical role in responding for COVID. It's been playing an important role in even charting a recovery agenda. So we are actually very keen at the UNDP to try and see in what ways actually COVID-19 has impacted the social and economically the country. We wanted to know in what ways it will impact the goals. We are also very much aware that COVID-19 has strained public resources, and therefore countries, local governments are obliged, cities are obliged to do more with less. Therefore, it becomes extremely clear for us that data is important for them to do innovative service delivery and then do public administration well. So what we are really advocating at this stage is that we really are saying data is important, its quality is important. We need to have freely accessible data, which is standardized and machine readable, for all of us to have an opportunity to use that gold mine and cash it by way of efficiency, effectiveness, and transparency and accountability. It's equally important for also private sector to recover fast from the pandemic effect, if I may say so. So I think there is a lot of agreement with all of us here today that data is important, it must be relevant, it must be accurate, it must be granular, and it must be in real time. And I'm sure you also agree from the previous presentation that we're not yet there. And the Philippines 2019 Voluntary National Report for Sustainable Development also highlighted some of these challenges that the previous speaker has also talked about, especially in the issue of data gap. It's insufficiency in terms of granularity to be able to deliver on the leave no one behind principle, meaning knowing who are going to be left behind. So in this recognition that UNDP, in collaboration with our partners, such as PSA, the Liveable City Challenge, the League of Cities, Thinking Machine, and I believe some of the local governments who are in attendance today here, that we built, tested, and rolled out new data innovations that can help us keep an eye on the SDGs, come up with innovative ways of delivering services at local level, and achieve this ambitious agenda. So I'm glad that we are here today. My colleague, Francis Capi, will be able to elaborate on those new data innovations, and let me hand over to him. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Yemi. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, colleagues, and most especially to the mayors who are taking your time to attend this, as well as the we see also very much keen interest in the topic at hand, and I hope to be able to address some of these. And as Yemi said, I wanted to be to share with you some of the little, not really little, but some of the experiments and initiatives that we're undertaking to try to improve the data ecosystem for SDGs at the city level. Just to emphasize, Yemi said that there's progress, but we might have taken we might have slid back a little because of COVID. There's 10 years to go before before the deadline we set for ourselves to meet the SDGs. So there's urgency. Nevertheless, there's urgency in the situation. We want to be able to see sustainable development happening in our lifetime. And this entails evidence-based leadership. We are talking about data, and maybe to the point of preaching to the crowd right now here. We know that data is important, but exactly how and what are the issues that we have to encounter, we have to rather that we need to deal with together, and that's something that we'd like to talk about with you today. We're not aiming for miracles, but rather measurable success and measurable results. As Brody, Soleil, and Yemi have spoken a lot about earlier, we know that the disaggregation of data is a problem. This is a slide that I've borrowed from Assistant National Statistician Wilma Guillen on the availability of data to measure the SDGs. Just for background, back in 2017, the Philippine Statistics Authority, the governing board of the PSA, has approved 155 Philippine SDG indicators for monitoring. This is 155 out of a whole total of 200 plus. But at the moment, this is what we decided on to monitor, because in our, at least in the PSA's assessment, this is what's available, this is what's workable. This is what essentially they would call the tier 1 data at the national level, meaning it's feasible to do. But even with the tier 1 indicators, as we would put it, there's still a lot of gaps. Only 42% of indicators have provincial data, for example, provincial level data, and we're not even talking about the city and municipal level yet. Disaggregation by sex, age, geography, ethnicity, and other necessary measurements that would ensure that we do leave no one behind in development planning and execution is still a major challenge. And we're not yet even talking about the 129 indicators in the tier 2 or tier 3, which we're not yet monitoring at this point. So how can we gather and present SDG data at the city level? And with the Liveable Cities Challenge and with the League of Cities of the Philippines and colleagues in the country office, we began thinking about, given the data scarcity that we have and the need to have a clear, so to speak, clear eyes or clear sight on the goals, how can we try to parse and package and present how cities are faring and how municipalities are faring in achieving the SDGs? We tried to run the exercise by trying to assess what kind of data we can get. So in a way, we built on the PSA analysis and tried to scour for whatever data we can find. We focus for now on priority 1 and 2, basically looking for what's available or what can be requested. But we know that it's possible to access data that already exists. As Soleil mentioned earlier, there are databases that sit within LGUs, whether it's in paper or in actual electronic format. Many cities and municipalities have been running at least one CBMS. So we know that, I mean, across there's a lot of disparity in the timing of running the CBMS, but nevertheless, that's an important factor. And we do know that with the CBMS law and awaiting the guidelines to be released by the PSA, we will soon need to, rather LGUs will all need to run the CBMS on a more regular and predictable cadence. But of course, we know that we don't always need to extract the data from the citizens through surveys. We don't always need to rely on official data. Although that is important, we do know that there are alternative data sources that we can explore. And this would include data generated by the academe and other interested parties in the course of their research, partnerships with the private sector. We know that the private sector sits in tons of data, and how might we be able to use that, try to measure SDG performance. And of course, there are new tricks with machine learning and artificial intelligence, which our colleagues at Thinking Machines will be talking about after this. So we did, again, working with the Liveable Cities Challenge and the League of Cities and tapping Thinking Machines as our contractor for this project, we tried to prototype what an SDG dashboard might look like for cities and municipalities. So we wanted to prototype an interactive dashboard. We use Tableau. It's one of the more popular and user-friendly business analytics software that's available. We tried to set a modest but difficult goal nonetheless of having one indicator for each of the 17 SDGs. We know there's 100 indicators. Not all of them would have a city level disaggregation. We tried to look for the data even that for each of the 17 SDGs from wherever it is, whether it's in open data already, whether it's trying to scrape from PDFs available online, or even estimating using satellite maps. So we wanted to do one indicator per SDG just for the sake of demonstration at the moment, with the intention, of course, of building on top of this dashboard further. And we wanted to visualize progress of each city against goals based on target sets and benchmarks, and also against their peers. But of course, we don't want to pit one LGU against each other. We don't also want to unnecessarily, shame. That's not the intention of this exercise, but the exercise is really to try to put in an objective measure of where a city is sitting against the global goals and what else needs to be done. And I suppose the other benefit of having this dashboard is that a city or a municipality can find a fellow city or municipality that could probably be having same characteristics and could be encountering the same problems or same challenges, and maybe they can collaborate and join forces. So this is how it stands. I will not demonstrate the dashboard right now for lack of time, but feel free to look at feel free to visit the prototype dashboard now on bit.ly/sdgcities.th. But let me just run through its main views. So really the first view is the overview. We, at the high level for all of the cities and municipalities, based on the data that we gathered per SDG, we try to assess, we try to present how many of the goals are being achieved and where do we have challenges. And we of course have a map view down here. And here you can see the progress for each of the goals. No poverty, zero hunger, and to see on average where the cities tend to sit. So if the dot is here, we can say that for the goal of clean water and sanitation, most of the cities on average are encountering challenges in attaining that particular sustainable development goal. Yemi mentioned poverty earlier, and this, by the way, one caveat is we relied, of course, on what's available, and the poverty data that we're using here is quite old. It's 5 years old, and that's the best that we can gather right now. That's the small area estimates from PSA. We tried to explore doing using CBMS for it, but as I mentioned earlier, they're measured at different years, so we'll have difficulty in the aggregation. But as mentioned by Yemi earlier, we were in that challenges remain segment at the moment, quite near to attaining it, but as to whether we slid back because of COVID, we don't know, but there are indications such as a recent survey that we ran, the poverty incidence is likely to increase by, according to the World Bank, the estimate is 1 million. This is another view. This is where you select a city. So here, in this case, it is Lapu-Lapu, Cebu. And compared against compared against the region, at the province rather. So the city is ranked against the other cities or municipalities in the province. So it's 7th in the province and 385th nationwide when it comes to no poverty. You can select, of course, other SDG indicators. Below would be what we call the single SDG view, where essentially we show for this particular goal, no poverty. This is the ranking of all the cities, and we know that Lanao del Sur, being the poorest province at the moment in the country, it's really unfortunately being a little red right there right now, and when we're hoping to of course bring some development action there, as many development actors are already on the ground. Finally, and this is where one can choose particular regions, provinces, and cities to compare side by side against based on all the goals. So that's just a quick view of our city's dashboard. How we're faring right now, this is how it looks like based on different SDGs. Some are in some SDGs, like percentage of out of school youth, that's the education SDG, we're quite performing well. But when it comes to, for example, gender equality in the government, the metric here, I think, is the percentage of women in city councils or municipal councils. It's still a male-dominated world, and we'd like to see some progress here. But again, the big caveat is there's some issues with the data, even to the extent that we spent a lot of time, the thinking machines folks have spent a lot of time cleaning, scraping, and processing the data. We still have issues on, for example, freshness. I did mention earlier, poverty incidence is quite old. There's also still some disaggregation issues like economic development and unemployment and manufacturing and industry. SDGs 8 and 9, for example, they're still at a very high level. At the regional level, I think there's no breakdown yet. That's more granular. So those are areas where we can do a little more work. But again, having said that, we do have a solution that we are rolling out in certain, right now in certain cities and municipalities. It's called Development Live. So it's really a system for the collection, organizing, visualization, and management of data for development. Baselining, to be candid, this project actually started off as a climate risk assessment platform. So it's really for databasing of climate risks and disaster risks, but we said that a few more tweaks and we can actually present a fuller picture of the sustainable development goals here. Development Live is capable of socioeconomic profiling, hazard and risk assessment, integrated in the data integration in land use and development plans, monitoring service delivery, disaster preparedness, and of course the local SDGs. Right now, the capabilities are focused on survey and field enumeration. Just to answer some of the questions in the Q&A, this is in a way to implement the CBMS, and we're working with the PSA to make sure that the field enumeration work is consistent with CBMS, that it passes as compliance to the CBMS law. But apart from the enumeration, we also wanted to explore the inputting of alternative data sources and whatever existing data that cities might have. So DevLive Plus is really at the core a tool for ingestion, analysis, and visualization. We are developing a data warehouse that hopefully can push and pull data from and to these LGU level DevLive deployments. The idea is we hope to enhance the intelligence that arrives through at the local DevLive system through whatever data that we process at the national level. And the intention is to ensure that this data is relevant and useful for, again, development planning, disaster readiness and response, and SDG monitoring and engagement. I'm gonna, for lack of time, I'm gonna skip this. But if interested, please we are always free, more than willing to have a demonstration of the DevLive system for LGUs that are interested. It is there are a lot of standard visualizations in it, but we can also customize based on your needs. And I do note that at the moment, for example, I note that the mayor of Vegan is here. We are working with Vegan City to implement DevLive Plus. Not only for the data collection via enumeration, but also trying to make use of the available data. We've had some deployments in Biliran, Lanao del Sur, and I do note that the predecessor of DevLive Plus is climate readiness related system. We've deployed it in Eastern Visayas, post Yolanda. I guess for a last slide, I just want to note that we also have set up what we call a Pintig Lab, and that is an advanced research and analytics lab of the UNDP, and this is a capability that, of course, will also be available to partners who are working with us on the DevLive Plus. So in conclusion, just want to reiterate certain messages. Data is essential for cities. I guess we all believe in that right now. but of course, the capacity to use data planning, programming, and monitoring is key. So this is what and lastly, multi-sectoral collaboration and use of digital systems has immense potential for enhancing SDG data. With that, I end, and thank you so much. Sorry for taking up for being a little over time, and over to you, Bill.
Okay, thank you, Cappy, and thank you, Yemi. So now we've seen a different use of the data to get the SDGs, and I think now the audience is probably getting a better idea that a lot of the technology and systems are beginning to be made available that makes data collection hopefully easier, and the data processing and the analytics more accessible by all people. So thanks, Yemi and Cappy, for that. And I think the key takeaway, of course, is that we need data to be detailed, granular, and timely. Data that's too old is of little use to us. If we want to make the best decisions, we need data that's going to be as fresh as possible. So now let's move on to our next topic. And here we're going to begin to see just how far we can begin to take the data in terms of not only the collection and the processing and the analysis, but even the practical uses of the data for making decisions and for making especially development types of decisions. So let me start first with a question, as usual, to tee up this topic. And let me ask the question: for your city, which of the following data would you most like to see on a map? Okay, is it income and poverty incidence by barangay? Is it health facilities? Is it education facilities? Is it employment? Which one would be the most important one for you? Just select one of the four. Okay, so here again, clear majority, 68% would like to get income data. I think in this particular question, since you have more than one choice, we have more than 100% in the total. But far and away, income and poverty incidence by barangay is important to most people in the room. So thank you for that. As I mentioned, now you see that technology is available. Data, of course, is available, but you have to work at it. And now we're going to get to more sophisticated presentations of what this data can look like for you. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Pia Faustino. So Pia's head of data insights and social sector engagements at Thinking Machines Data Science, a data technology company that builds data and AI platforms to solve high impact problems. With a unique combination of 8 years of experience in journalism and 5 years of experience in data analytics, Pia now leads teams of designers, engineers, and data scientists at Thinking Machines in developing tools and systems to enable organizations to discover meaning, insights, and even stories in their data. I've been working for the last couple of months quite closely with Pia and a lot of our colleagues at Thinking Machines on uh, as they have developed dashboards that enable us to keep track of COVID across the country. And they've built some really great dashboards that allows us to understand where COVID is and how fast or slow it's spreading. So you get to see the type of technology that they have. So to give us a better understanding on the power of data, uh, let us please welcome Pia.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for that intro. Let me just share my screen. Okay. All right. So start. Thanks again for having us at today's event. It's super interesting to read all the really sharp, relevant questions that are being asked in the Q&A. I'm excited for the Q&A later. So what I'll talk about today is how cities can harness the power of data science, artificial intelligence, machine learning in order to reach some of your goals. And what I'll talk about is like, first, what is machine learning? And what are some interesting applications or use cases for this technology that might be relevant to cities. And my goal is to kind of spark your imagination about what are the possibilities of what you can do with data. So I'll talk a bit about who our team is and what we do. Like I mentioned, just a little bit about what AI is all about. And then I'll talk about two types of applications or use cases that might be relevant for you. One is about how you can use AI to unlock data that might be trapped in paper documents. And then the other one is some samples of use cases for how do you harness the power of maps? How do you gather a lot of interesting and useful data that you might not have yourself, but you can gather it about the outside world. So first about our team. As Sir Bill mentioned, we're a data technology company. We build tools and platforms that help solve problems for our clients. And we work with clients from many different sectors, both the private sector and also the public sector, the development sector. So we've been working with, private businesses. Also, we've been working quite a bit with UNDP. So Cappy mentioned some of our work earlier. Also with Sir Bill and the team, some of the private sector teams that are trying to address the COVID response. So all of these kinds of use cases we've worked with. And basically what we do is we build systems to help people get value out of their data. And that spans a lot of different types of expertise. We have people who help with the strategy aspect, planning it. We have people who build data warehouses and integrated data systems. We, of course, also do some more advanced analytics, such as machine learning and AI, and we do visualization as well. So first, when I say AI and machine learning, what am I actually talking about? It sounds like a little bit of there's a sci-fi angle to it. I think when people think of AI, they think of robots, right? But actually, AI is a lot, you encounter it a lot in your everyday life, whether you know it or not. So when we're talking about AI, what do we mean? AI is basically, we're talking about computers that can do tasks that normally it requires human beings to do. So these tasks might be things like visual perception, speech recognition, translation, human beings are very good at recognizing patterns of information. And so there's a whole field of study in figuring out how machines can be more like humans and do similar tasks. And machine learning is kind of a subset of AI that's focusing on how do you make machines learn in the same ways that people can learn. For example, if you have children, I have a 4-year-old daughter, the way that she learned how to speak and how to recognize objects is by, just we show her objects one by one, and we tell her what it is. This is a banana, this is an apple, this is a grape, and she will just pick it up without us having to, show her a book or, have flashcards or something. People just, like children, just absorb that information by seeing lots of examples in the world. And machine learning is it's a lot like that, in that you're teaching machines what patterns in the world look like and how to label them by showing them a lot of data, by showing them a lot of labeled examples. So, whereas humans learn from experience and computers learn from, normally when you teach a computer how to do something, but when you program a computer to do something, you have to give it very specific examples. With machine learning, you actually allow the computer to learn on its own by just showing it what the outputs or what the outcomes should be. So this is kind of a different kind of approach to making machines do certain things. And why is this relevant? Because there's an explosion of data. So just think of all of the data points you generate whenever you check your phone or whenever you go online and search for something. There's just so much data being generated nowadays that AI has a lot more material to work with. There's a lot more data with which to train the machines to learn about, right? So, whenever you open your phone, let's say you ask Siri a question, that's an example of AI in action. Whenever you post a picture on Facebook and it recognizes the face of somebody in that picture, that's also AI in action. Every time you have a YouTube recommended video shown to you based on your previous viewing behavior, that's an example of AI and machine learning in action. So a lot of organizations are figuring out how to use these techniques, not only for growing their businesses, but also how to solve really big challenges like poverty, inequality, etc. So we at Thinking Machines, what we do is we build platforms and tools that help organizations harness data about three things. So about places, documents, and people. When I say places, I'm talking about geospatial data. And when I say documents, I'm talking about large volumes of text, often in PDFs or paper documents that need to be organized somehow. And I'll talk about some examples of use cases in these two areas. So with documents, I think it's safe to say that a lot of have treasure troves of data. There's so much data that's there, but as I think I heard mentioned earlier in the LCP presentation, a lot of these data are still in paper form. In order to analyze it and being able to visualize it, or even just summarize the information that's in those paper forms, you need to have it digitized, right? And this is a big challenge because digitizing paper documents is very labor intensive. As you know, it's time consuming. You're going to have to hire a lot of people to translate those documents into type them out, etc. So at Thinking Machines, we actually have a suite of solutions called Doc AI, which is meant to accelerate the digitization of paper documents. Digitizing paper documents, especially if they're all in different formats, you have to scan some very old documents and they might be hard to read. Usually it takes human beings to do that. But we found ways of using artificial intelligence to speed up that process. So instead of having 10 people typing away every day, you can have 1 or 2 people that's using AI to quickly digitize the documents and then just validate or correct if the digitization is correct. And what this unlocks is the ability to summarize, analyze, and get insights out of that data in a more scalable way. So for example, if you have, so we've worked with an organization that wanted to analyze documents from COA, or the Commission on Audit. And a lot of these documents were in PDF format. They were in tabular format, but what the client that we were working with, the organization we were working with, they needed this data to be in an Excel format, right? So it's very challenging. They couldn't figure out a way to reliably get that data into Excel without causing a lot of errors or taking a lot of time. So basically, we automated this whole process for them, and they were able to analyze the data. They were able to focus on analyzing the data rather than on encoding the data all over again. Another example of an interesting use of applying AI to documents. So a couple of years ago, we worked with the World Bank. The World Bank had the goal of trying to link different data sets about the same road projects. So we're trying to link information about the same road project across government data silos. So for example, they wanted to be able to track how a project goes from budgeting to procurement to execution. And this required linking databases about, of course, the GAA or the budget, plus the data in the PhilJEPS system or procurement bids, plus contracts with the DPWH. So initially they had a team of, I think, 4 or 5 analysts trying to do this manually, looking at documents one by one and identifying which documents are about the same road project. And it took their team something like 2 months just to figure out like something like 2,000 projects. Which of all of these thousands of documents, can we just find at least 2,000 that are about the same, that we know are about the same project. So what we did was we used natural language processing to identify keywords in the documents that would basically tell us if multiple documents are about the same project. So extracting like location keywords or keywords regarding to what type of project it was, whether it was like a cementing project or a new road building project or a road rehabilitation project. And then basically the algorithm was able to reduce the effort that it takes to manually link these databases. So instead of hiring a team of analysts to do something for 5 months, the algorithm could do the same, comparably the same amount of work with the same accuracy in just like 30 minutes. So this is something, I've seen a couple of questions earlier about linking data silos. This is something that could be explored if you're working with databases that don't have linking keys. Just another example, we've worked with a financial investment firm that needed to analyze a lot of very text-heavy documents about the financial performance of companies that they're trying to assess, right? And so these documents tended to be hundreds of pages long, and it would take so much time for an analyst to read through them. So what we did was we basically made an AI that you could just type in a question about the document that you're reading, and then the AI would refer to the right paragraph in the document where the answer to your question lies. So this really reduced a lot of the time that they put into analyzing these documents. So I'll talk now about some of the interesting applications for geospatial AI or mapping. So a lot of the solutions I just discussed were about how do you make the most of data that you own and that you have. But there are a lot of use cases where the cities may not even have access to that data on their own. They need to get the data from the outside world. And I've saw a lot of questions about how do we run a CBMS survey in our town. It takes quite a bit of time, and it can be costly. So there are actual alternative sources of this kind of external geospatial data or demographic data that you can explore. So if you need data about demographics, income and poverty, for example, was the most requested map, I think, of all of the participants in the room earlier. If you're interested in data on how many buildings are in your city, how many ATMs or, I don't know, sari-sari stores, for example, might be in your city. What is the different, what's the different land values in your city? These are things that you can, if you blend it with your own data, you can get a lot of insights out of. So some of the use cases that we've done, about 2 years ago, we worked with the UNICEF Innovation Fund to think about how we might estimate income and poverty at a very granular level for the entire Philippines in a way that's much faster and cheaper than running a ground survey. So basically what we did is we trained a machine learning model to look at satellite imagery, nighttime lights from NASA, and then also OpenStreetMap data or data on points of interest and roads, basically infrastructure. And we tried to train this model to see if it could estimate how wealthy or poor a place is based on those things. And basically, the model was trained on, it was also trained on survey data. So it, again, like I mentioned, if you're gonna train a machine to be able to predict something, you have to show it ground truth. You have to show it an example. So we used as our training information the Demographic and Health Survey of 2017, in which there were about 1,200 locations surveyed around the Philippines. And in these locations, the enumerators assessed the relative wealth index of the different households there. So a wealth index, it's not an income level, but it's more of an abstract number that measures how relatively poor or wealthy a household is based on different characteristics of the household, such as the whether it has certain types of assets or appliances, whether it's electrified, what kind of roof type it has, etc. So the wealth index is like a general measure of development for a place. So these 1,200 locations, of course, there's way more than 1,200 locations in the Philippines. If we want to know the wealth index across places that are not even included in that survey, we wanted to see if we could use satellite imagery to infer this instead. So if you notice the photo here at the upper right, this is a satellite image, I think somewhere in Taguig. And you can easily tell that the place on the left is wealthier than the place on the right, right? Because there are certain attributes. You have bigger houses, there's more trees, there's straighter roads, wider roads. So there are certain visual attributes like that that are associated with wealth. So for the other locations that were not covered by surveys, this is what the machine learning model we developed can do. So the result is using satellite imagery, which is now actually available. You can buy satellite imagery online, and I think there's like there's thousands of satellite images being taken of the entire globe every day. So you can buy satellite imagery for almost any point in time in any place in the Philippines. So what we've done is to build a machine learning, an AI that can estimate the relative wealth of a particular 18 square kilometer area on a scale of, let's say 0 to 1, 0 being the poorest and 1 being the wealthiest. So what this enables us to do is to have a much more granular estimate of how wealth and income varies across a particular province. So I believe the PSA, when they do their census every couple of years, they release the data at the province level, but I think they don't do the small area estimates at the municipal level as frequently. So something like this, it's able to be able to update their estimates based on satellite imagery as frequently as every quarter. If you want to, basically every time there's new satellite imagery to look at, that you can get an updated estimate. So this is something that might be useful to LGUs that are looking for more fine-tuned estimates and looking for something that can kind of tide them over between being able to do field surveys, especially now in COVID times, where it's hard to send people out into the field, right? This could be something that could be an estimate of wealth in between survey periods. Another use case we've done, this is actually in South America. So we've worked with an organization called IMAP. It's a humanitarian organization. They are based in Colombia, and they've been working with Venezuelan migrants. So if you know, there's an economic crisis in Venezuela right now. There are millions of Venezuelans who have been moving from Venezuela to Colombia in order to escape the crisis. And if you look at this photo here, this is a time lapse showing a new informal settlement emerging over time. So from 2017 to 2019, we had this particular place along the border of Colombia went from being a field of trees to now becoming basically a home for many migrants. And if you see the photo here on the bottom right, this is a picture of what one of those settlements look like. So it's very difficult to find these settlements. Colombia is, I think, maybe 2 times or 3 times as large as the Philippines. And IMAP, in order to provide assistance to these communities, they would have to send people out into the field to find them. So they needed a faster way of detecting the settlements. So what we did was using satellite imagery again, we trained the model to detect where these settlements are most likely to actually be located. This is using free and open source satellite imagery as well. So as a result, what we came up with was our model was able to produce a map of selected areas in Colombia. And the highlighted portions on the map are areas where we think it's highly probable that a new informal settlement has emerged. So far, we've been able to detect something like 400 settlements in just a matter of 2 or 3 months. And of these settlements, so far 100% have been proven could to be confirmed. I mean, of the settlements that have been investigated on the ground, about 100% of those have been confirmed to be actual informal settlements with Venezuelan migrants. So for mapping physical attributes of a place, satellite imagery can be a very interesting source of information. So this is just an example of what a particular settlement looked like 3 years ago versus now, and how it showed up on the probability map. Last couple of use cases. So there's other things you can also estimate, and things, I mean, I've talked about things like wealth and informal settlements, but you can actually also estimate something a bit more financial, like property values. So we actually trained a machine learning model as well to estimate property valuations in Singapore with about 84%. I was able to correct about 84% of the time. So using attributes of the place, such as, how far is a particular location from a hotel, a restaurant, a road, you can also predict pretty accurately how much properties in that place will go for. One last case study is with regard to mapping out access of vulnerable areas to health facilities. So this is not actually strictly AI, but more of geospatial analytics. So we worked with ADB and DOH on this late last year, where they wanted to understand where should new health centers be built based on the number of people who do not have access or do not live within 2 hours or 3 hours of a health facility. So basically, we mapped it out, and then we combined the locations of the health facilities with poverty and population data to really find those areas that should be prioritized. Oh, one more. So the last thing is about using Waze information for traffic management. I think a lot of LGUs, although maybe less so now that there's a pandemic, have to deal with managing traffic in their locations. Thinking Machines is the only research partner Waze. The Philippines, we have access to about 2 years worth of traffic incidents and traffic jam data on Waze for the entire country. And using this information, we can really tell a lot about, if certain traffic interventions are doing well or not, what's the outcome of those, what are the specific streets and what times of day they tend to peak in terms of the traffic. So this is another example of how you can leverage user-generated and alternative data sources for your purposes. Okay, so with that, I hope I was able to come up, spark some ideas about how you might harness data. If you have any questions, please do feel free to message us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Pia. You're right, it sounds a bit like sci-fi, but I'm sure it's not. You've got all the satellite pictures, you've got the machine learning and the AI working. And I think just imagine how much data we could collect and to what use it can be deployed within a city to help a city answer its public health or education or financial questions or employment questions it may have about a city. Let me move to our last session. And, for all of this data analytics to work, we need quality data, we have data integrity, and of course, you need some basic data governance practices in place. And that's going to be the topic of our next session. But before that, let me ask a question again. Looking at all the data that you see now, how do you globally, how much do you think volumes will increase by next year? You see a 20% gain, 40%, 60, or 80% increase in data volume by next year? Okay, let's see the response. 60% is the not the majority, but at least the predominant response. 36% said 60%, and another 30% said 80%. So let's take a look at, with all this volume of data coming in on a regular basis, how do we manage the data, keep it clean, and govern, set up a data governance setup for all this data. To take us through that, let me turn you over now to Miguel Acosta. So Miggs is the data management head for Globe, which is under the Enterprise Data Office. He is tasked with championing Globe's data governance and overall data management strategy. He graduated from Ateneo with a Bachelor of Science in Management Engineering and has been working in various data management roles for the past 15 years across various industries from healthcare, energy, banking, and telecommunications. Ladies and gentlemen, let's please welcome Miggs Acosta.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Sir Bill, and thank you to the League of Cities for giving me the opportunity to address you today, to talk to you about a topic that is very near and dear to me. It's something that is also become somewhat of an advocacy of mine together with my team in Globe. And I'll talk to you today about data governance, maybe give you a little bit of a crash course or some basics around it, and how it can help kickstart your data journey. But before I talk about data governance, let me just maybe take a step back and give you some facts about data first. All right. Okay. The first one is that data is growing exponentially. And Pia also already touched on this point earlier, right? That as a result of the world being increasingly digital, and as a result of us getting smarter, so it started with smartphones, and then you have smart watches, smart gadgets, moving into smart cities and also IoT. A lot of these generate a lot of data, and they also use a lot of data. So based on a study that was done by the International Data Corporation, it's anticipated that there will be a 60% year-on-year increase in the amount of data generated worldwide. So I'm happy that the majority of you, this was the poll question, by the way, and the ones who answered C, 60%, that is the correct answer. And I'm happy that at least most of us got the answer right. And at least the majority leaned towards having maybe even a greater percentage increase, which shows me that I think in general, we acknowledge this fact that data will grow exponentially, and it's already growing exponentially. And the next fact is that not all data is created equal. And this is, again, something that is easily proven by a poll question earlier when it was asked, which data would you want to see in a map? And I guess it was pretty easy to sort of rank according to preference. But also in general, just to illustrate this point, not all data is created equal. Some are really more important than others. Definitely from a from a city perspective or a local government perspective, any data that will help us either in disaster preparedness or anything that will help in the security and safety of our constituents definitely would be more important than maybe habits or interests of our constituents. So with that, the increase in the amount of data that will be made available or is available, and the fact that not all data is created equal, the challenge really now is how do we identify which data is critical, which data is important, and which one is fit for purpose. And this is actually where data governance can help, right? So let's I guess talk about data governance a bit. What is data governance? It's a pretty lengthy explanation there in the slide, but really at bottom line and simply put, it's a system of accountability for data assets, right? And I would like to emphasize a few points here. The first one is accountability, the concept of accountability. And this actually means establishing owners and being able to assign owners to data, someone being held accountable for it. Second is the concept of data as an asset, right? So meaning something that is of value or something that is valuable. And again, all the other speakers have illustrated the value of data through their dashboards, through their initiatives, and through the use cases that were presented. And lastly, it's all about identifying key information and making sure that they're appropriately defined, used, and maintained. So Brody mentioned earlier that the LCP database has around 10,000 attributes. I don't think we have the capacity, the bandwidth to actually define, maintain, and actually really go through all those 10,000 attributes individually under a fine-tooth comb. So it's really important for us to identify which ones are critical and which ones are fit for purpose, and which ones we will maybe really focus on. And bottom line, what data governance wants to achieve really is for us to have trust in data. And I heard this also earlier about there being some trust issues around maybe national government data versus local government data. But I think data governance is exactly here to address that point, for us to be able to establish trust in the data that we have and in the data that we use. So let's move now into the data life cycle, which is, I guess, the context in which data governance is set, right? So usually data starts with the creation of it and the eventual collection of data. Then you go into transformation, which is usually your consolidation or the processing of information and getting it from a raw state into a more consumable form. Then after that goes consumption or use. And this is where we do reporting, visualization, and where we let the data do the work for us. And lastly, there's also archiving and destruction. So again, I mentioned earlier that data is an asset, and along with it being an asset, it will also have a useful life. And therefore, at some point, it will either become stale or old or incorrect, and therefore will have to be archived and set aside eventually. So I'll go into more detail now around data governance components, right? And there are really three basic components to data governance. The first one being people, and then there I say this is the most important one, to me. And really, it talks about the people who are in contact with the data, who are responsible for interacting with it in its whole life cycle, from the time that it gets created, processed, used, all the way until it gets destroyed. And I mentioned here two critical roles in a data governance implementation, that being a data owner and a data steward. A data owner is someone who would have the responsibility or accountability for a particular data set, how it's defined, how it's used, and basically how it's processed, and even to the point of sometimes dictating policy around how this data should be collected or used. And another role on the data governance implementation would be a data steward, and these are the people who would interact with the data more on a day-to-day basis as part of maybe a reporting or an analytics function. The second component to data governance is process. And so if the people aspect of it answers the who, the process answers the how. So in this case, it involves looking into current processes around that data life cycle and really understanding, how the data is generated. How do we consolidate everything? Do we have data standards that we want to adopt to? And ultimately also being able to audit this information and making sure that we do comply with standards. And there was a lot of this mentioned earlier about data quality. It's also part of the process to be able to define, a quality measurement framework. And I will go through that in more detail in the succeeding slides. And last but not least is technology, or the systems and applications that we use to store information, do reporting, do analytics, and the like. Right? So these are the three main components of data governance. Now, I would like to move on to, I guess, maybe the next segment of the presentation would now be more around some of the tips and tricks in order to make a data governance implementation a success. And these are things that I've learned along the way. Some of them I've learned firsthand and have experienced firsthand. So let me start with principle number 1. Right? So data is everyone's business, and I cannot stress this fact enough. Right? We have on the data side, it's usually the people who will actually need the information who are tagged as being responsible for it. And I beg to differ with that statement. It is everyone's business. We all need to look into, it involves the people who generate the information. It involves people who store and manage information. It involves people who use information for reporting and analytics, and it involves people who archive information. And the key here also is, if you're thinking of doing a data governance implementation specific to your LGUs, everyone has to be aligned, and it actually can even expand that thought at the national level as well. So if there seems to be distrust in data between the local and the national level, then all the more reason for data to be everyone's business. It's everyone's responsibility to understand how exactly how good quality of our data is, how we source this information, how it's being processed. So everyone is in complete alignment on how to use it. Second principle, data governance is not rocket science, right? So it's not overly complex. It doesn't involve higher math, nor does it involve specialization. In fact, a lot of these concepts are bordering on the obvious, and it's something that I guess it's very obvious, in fact, that a lot of the other speakers already mentioned some of the data governance concepts as either being lacking and therefore causing a pain point on their end, or something that is a must, right? So I think we can all agree that it's very simple and straightforward, but really the challenge is in operationalizing it, in making it sustainable. And this is, I think, where a lot of the data governance implementations fail. It's, there's no problem in, starting an implementation like this, in rallying people around, rallying the troops. But I guess, months after this, the interest wanes. If there are no quick wins set, then no one sees accomplishments, no one sees progress, and the momentum is lost. And eventually, you're right back to where you started. So again, it's not rocket science. Operationalization is key. The third principle, data governance is not a project. So here, a project has a defined start and end, whereas data governance does not, right? So as long as we need data and use data, we will definitely need data governance. And I always make this joke that, kung sa pag-ibig walang forever, sa data governance may forever. And lastly, data governance is powered by a data-driven mindset. So I'm sure you've heard the term data-driven. It's a term that's thrown around a lot these days, and usually it's associated with the use of data to make intelligent decision making, right? And I actually have a bit of a different take around the definition of data-driven and what it means to me. So on top of using data to be able to make decisions, it's also around understanding the data and understanding this whole process around it and this whole process behind it, on top of just focusing on its use, right? So we talk here about, understanding again how it's collected, whether the source information is consistent, and if we're able to validate data quality at all. And speaking of data quality, here are 6 data quality dimensions. These are the most commonly used ones that are really, really important in order for us to be able to quantify quality for a particular data set. Right? So the first one is completeness. And here it addresses the question, are all your necessary data present? You have validity, which is simply the adherence to agreed or defined values, right? So an example of that would be, let's say, gender, and valid values there would be either male or female or M or F, right? So if you know that you don't have any of those values there, or if you see any other value, then chances are the data might be incorrect. Third one is consistency. And this talks more about the interoperability of data, right? And I don't know if you've noticed, but the majority of the analytics use cases, and even the ones that Pia presented earlier, they involve mixing and matching, different data sets. And consistency is a way to do that where we know that we're doing it apples to apples. The fourth one is uniqueness. It's simply a control against duplicate records or duplicate entries. You have the fifth one, which is timeliness. And here, again, what good is having data if you don't have it when you need it? And the last one is on accuracy and about how much it reflects. Basically, it's around correctness and how it reflects real life values. So I think that's been a handful. So let's recap the 4 key principles, right? The first one, data is everyone's business. Second, data governance is not rocket science. It's operationalization that is key. The third one, data governance is not a project. So it's forever. And the last one, data governance is powered by a data-driven mindset. So maybe as a, in closing, all of these use cases, we've seen the power of data. We've seen, how it can be used for the greater good. So let's not forget that it is data that powers all of this, and that we need to protect, we need to govern our data effectively to be able to harness that power and to be able to make analytics work for us. And I think one more point here that I just remembered on the in terms of implementing or going into and delving into analytics, right? If it's something that is of interest to you and your cities, definitely there are experts on the data science and we can also leave it up to the experts to be able to to do the analytics for us, to be able to do the machine learning and the artificial intelligence development for us. But the data will still be coming from you guys, right? So it's in your best interest really to take ownership of that data and to act as owners. And with that, I will close with a quote from Sid Friedman of Gartner. Gartner is a market research company, and he says, "Data is useful. High quality, well understood, auditable data is priceless." So with that, I will turn you back over to Sir Bill. Thank you very much and good afternoon.
Thank you, Migs. And so the main insight is data is everybody's business, and I think as Migs was saying, we've seen many examples and use cases of data and data analytics, and we can see all the possibilities. But all of this is actually not possible without strong and steady access to a connection. And that connection is made possible only when the right infrastructure is put in place. So the Philippines needs more telecommunications infrastructure, especially at this time when more people need to go online, regardless of what sector we're talking about or what line of business or even in government. We see more people getting online. So let's watch this video to learn more about the impact of better telecom infrastructure and the role that telecom infrastructure has to play.
May mga lugar akong pinupuntahan, I have to communicate to people pero walang sites, walang signal. Nung wala pang internet na ganun kaayos, putol-putol, kailangan nakaganon sa bintana. Kailangan naghahanap ka ng signal sa kabi-kabila. Pero ngayon, with a very good signal that we are starting to experience, sobrang convenient. When I became governor, I opened up a very clear communication with Globe Telecom, which I hope to enhance more in the coming days. Sapagkat sa panahong ito, kailangan nating makisabay sa mabilis na inog ng mundo because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Kinailangan ng probinsya ngayon mag-adjust sa bagong normal. Karamihan sa transaksyon ngayon, ginagamitan ng online. Karamihan sa ating mga ginagawa ngayon through internet.
Ang problema po talaga dito, komunikasyon. Wala po signal dito. Napakahirap po. Taramdam ko po na kung ano ang kahalagahan ng komunikasyon sa isang bayan o sa isang barangay.
Definitely, kailangan natin maglagay ng mas marami pang cell sites sa iba't ibang bayan. Ngayong panahong to, ang Oriental Mindoro is no longer a rural province like before. Ang Oriental Mindoro is the center of commerce of Mimaropa. Being part of the Nautical Highway plays a very important role in the economic growth of the country.
Yung communication maayos na, yung mga internet maayos na. Noong una, nung wala pang cell site dyan, napakahirap talaga ng signal. Aling pang kudyong, ngayon bumilis, LTE na nga
Mas lumakas po ang internet dito dahil po sa Globe. Mas nakatulong po sa aming pag-research.
Sa amin po, sa San Vicente, talagang hirap pa rin kami talaga sa network. Mas inaas pa din po namin na magkaroon din po nung cell site dun sa amin.
Malinaw ang partnership namin ni Globe ngayon. Kailangan natin ang modern communication sa panahong ito. Internet, cellphone signal, very important in our lives during this time. Kung walang Globe cell site ngayon, paano na lang? Before, zero. Ngayon,
Okay, thank you. Let's move on. We'll just have a few minutes left for an open forum. I know a lot of the questions have been answered, but let's give a few minutes to at least answer a few more questions. Let me call back on stage, turn on your videos. Our speakers, Soleil Manzano from League of Cities, Broderick Sapnu, also from League of Cities. Yemi Worky from UNDP Philippines, Francis Capi Capistrano, UNDP Philippines, Pia Faustino from Thinking Machines, and Mix Acosta from Globe. And let me also take this opportunity to invite our mayors who are in the panel to turn on their videos and give them an opportunity to ask some of the questions in this remaining time that we have. So let's move to the questions. Would any of the mayors like to ask a question? Mayor Lanny, are you still here? I know that you had a few comments regarding CBMS, that you had wanted to get it started, but unfortunately COVID happened. Did you want to ask a question about CBMS, and did you need some help in executing the CBMS?
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Yes, good afternoon. Yes, I just want to find out how your company could assist us in continuing this project. This project was supposed to be done this year, but unfortunately, we had problems with budgets. Our budget allocations had to be forced through the COVID problems and solutions to it. So we'd like to find out if your company could assist us in having CBMS in the latter part of the year, or probably early next year.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Capi, maybe let me turn over to you first, and then ask the folks from League of Cities if they can help. Capi, would you be able to address?
Yeah, certainly. And I did message that our DevLive Plus team can get in touch with the team of Mayor Lani, in fact, with other interested chief executives on how we can undertake a CBMS compliant, essentially a CBMS. So I note that we're also working the standards and the rollouts out with the Philippine Statistical Authority. So we're making sure that whatever we undertake will be aligned with the law and the standards. Over.
Yep, thanks, Capi. Maybe, Capi, you could post your email address on the chat box for the benefit of the mayors, so that they can contact you directly or contact Yemi directly for some help.
Certainly. I'll also plug in the email of my teammate Mark, who's heading our DevLive Plus rollout in UNDP.
Okay, great, thanks. I have another question concerning SDGs. How is the Philippines able to cope with SDGs when we were lagging behind almost all the goals during the MDGs evaluation 5 years ago in 2015? So that's the Millennium Development Goals. We were lagging, and how are we coping now with SDGs?
Yeah, to the extent that I could answer, since I have not memorized all of the SDG data at the moment. But for example, when it comes to poverty, there's really been a huge decrease between 2015 to 2018. If I'm not mistaken, an estimated 7 million Filipino people, individuals meaning, have been lifted from poverty between that time. But of course, with COVID coming by, there have been estimates and also surveys run by UNDP, estimates by World Bank, the UN University, that that essentially the 7 million that we lifted from poverty between 2015 to 2018 could have already gone back to poverty. So that just illustrates the precarity of the situation. But I would note that there are other SDGs where we are performing quite well. For example, I would note that in education, in terms of attendance rates, rather, we were performing quite well. But we know that there has been some issue that was, I think, reported quite recently, that test scores were not really as good as were expected. So I would invite everyone actually to read the voluntary national review of the Philippines. That's the official report that's released by the National Economic and Development Authority. we're not really reporting on all the 17 SDGs, but on a select set of SDGs. So I think the last report was made last year. That one we can easily share later in the chat. But in many respects, we're performing well in some SDGs, like in terms of labor force participation rate, economic growth, if I might remember correctly, but there are certain SDGs where we're lagging behind, like solid waste management, marine litter, and malnutrition, if I'm not mistaken. So those really are that's the complexion of the situation. We're hitting some targets, performing well, but also there's underperformance in other targets. Oftentimes also it's a measurement challenge, since, for example, with a nutrition survey, with for example the methodology being used is really intensive, so you can't really do it at least at the granular level very regularly. Okay, so let me stop there and go into details in many of the SDGs. But again, the message is it's sometimes we're performing well, but in others there are some we're performing less than expected. Over.
Just to add,
yes, please go ahead.
Just to add, I think Kapi did a good job in responding to the question. If I may just say so, he's very right in pointing out that the results are mixed. However, with the COVID-19, we are reset in terms of SDG progress, really. So there's a need to relook at how we are going to be doing, especially if you look at poverty. PITS in July has just released a report indicating that close to additional 5.5 million Filipinos might be falling into poverty. And they are predicting actually that with a moderate consumption decline of 10%. If it is 20, it could even go higher. So what essentially is important to recognize is that because of government effort to put in the amelioration program, close to 4.4 million Filipinos might be protected as a result of that intervention. So they are indicating on the net, if 10% decline in consumption happens, poverty might increase even by 1.1 or above that, millions of Filipinos falling into poverty. So clearly the estimations are indicating regressions are inevitable in certain sectors of certain goals in SDGs. Again, the same happens with education. Especially I wanted to reiterate the point Kapi has made. Progress was made in education, in expanding primary, secondary, tertiary education. Dropout rate was declining and so forth. But with the digital divide, we're close to, I don't know, I think 35%, 40% of the households only in cities are having access to internet, computer, and digital services. Quite a number has been left behind. That will have a long-lasting impact on the capability of households and youth. So there is a number of issues we need to look at. The economy is in recession, employment has been affected, which is SDGs 8. So we can really talk about cities. 90% of the cities have been impacted, where manufacturing bases and service bases have been growing. So again, that will have an impact on the SDGs. So what I'm saying is that we really need to start re-looking closely each and every one of the goals for us to be able to make the determination on how we are faring. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yemi. Well, Globe, I notice you're getting a few questions, which I think you can directly address. People looking for more telecom infrastructure in different parts of the country. So I will leave the Globe team to respond to that offline directly with those cities concerned. Let me move to just, I know there's so many questions that we're going to try to answer them in writing if we don't, because we're not going to be able to finish them all today. But let me go to just the last question. And this is, maybe I'll address this to Pia or to Brody and Soleil at LCP. In terms of mapping, there are various authoritative maps in the country used by PSA, the LGUs, building officials, DENR, NAMRIA, Project NOVA, so on and so forth. Which one should be used as the standard? And are there any efforts to harmonize all of these maps?
Pia,
yes.
Yes. Honestly, that is a very, very good question. And there should be a discussion about which maps should be used and when. I think, I don't know honestly who is leading that conversation, but I do agree that it needs to happen. There's a lot of debates about which maps to follow, to be honest. And I think I don't know who's going to lead that conversation or how they're going to go about it, but I think the first step would be for each of the organizations to make open and transparent whatever geospatial data sets they're using, to make the metadata, meaning the descriptions of the data sets, the assumptions behind them, the methods by which they were collected, open to the partners or to the other stakeholders and users of the data, so that there can be that kind of open discussion about which ones to use and when and and why. But I honestly would love to see that kind of conversation being led by a government group. I'm not sure who it should be.
Okay, yeah, but that's a good question. There are really so many questions. I don't think we're going to have time to answer all of them, but let me just say a couple of things. One is that I'm getting some questions about, do people get the presentations? The answer is yes. We will be able to send you the presentations. We'll also be able to send you the recording, in fact, once we get everything done. It's been one of the, I guess, most popular Q&A sessions we've had among the 4 that we've run. We've had so many questions, and I'm happy most of them have been answered, but we will compile all the questions and answer them for you. But we are coming to the end of our time, and I want to thank our speakers and panelists for all your insights and thoughts on data and data analytics and data governance, and how data can be valuable but must be well managed and well governed by all of us. As I mentioned, you'll get the presentations, you get the questions that we can answer, you'll get a recording. Before I forget, I'd like to just invite everybody to answer the feedback form that will appear once you exit this webinar. And if you wish to receive a certificate of participation, please fill out your name on the form as you would like for it to appear on the certificate. And if you are following on Facebook, just take a picture of the QR code you see on Facebook, and you will get the feedback form and then answer that form. I'd like to thank all of you, the mayors, our speakers, and the audience for being such a patient audience today, listening to all the presentations and asking all of the questions. We look forward to seeing you at our next lab. That's going to be on Wednesday, September 16th. We're going to focus on GovTech, how to apply technology to government transactions, and how to, I guess, make local governments and government in general more customer friendly. So thank you on behalf of the League of Cities, on behalf of Globe, and on behalf of Liveable Cities Challenge. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Ngayong binabalot tayo ng dilim at pangamba,
Sabay-sabay ang pagkatok ng mga tanong na,
kaya pa ba?
saan ba tayo pupunta? May pag-asa pa ba?
Sa gitna ng lahat ng agam-agam, may mga bagay tayong muling natuklasan. Wala palang pagsubok ang makakatalo sa tatag ng ating nagkakaisang puso.
Nananalig, nagmamalasakit, nagbabayanihan,
Nagmamahal sa bayan,
sa kalikasan,
sa kalusugan,
sa pamilya,
at sa kapwa.
Kaya anumang pagsubok ang kakaharapin,
Umasang may magandang bukas para sa atin.
at pagkatapos ng lahat ng ito, sama-sama tayong tatayo.
It all starts with you. Your influence. How you use it. How far you'll take it. You can fuel a culture of innovation, world-changing solutions, and a digital revolution. One that can save lives and save the world we live in. Because in today's business, the goal is to go beyond, to move, not just to focus on I, but I will. And if you say, I will now, then you've already won. You already own tomorrow. A tomorrow where working separately can bring us closer to family. Where the things we waste can turn into things of wonder. Where children have room and reason to grow up. Where every organization has a common goal, to do good. Because we know better. So take on the challenge and ignite change. Use your influence, lead, inspire, and create beyond business. Remember, it all starts with you.
Sa ngayon po, kasi bilang isang volunteer po na PSU, hindi ko po mamalis ang pera kasi kami po isang volunteer lamang at 5,000 lang po ang aming sinasahod sa loob ng isang buwan.
Sa bahay kasi ako yung nagpo-budget sa pagbibili ng pagkain. So yung pera na yun talagang, minsan talagang pagkakasyahin mo.
Nagtitinda-tinda ako ngayon ng mga kakanin kahit papaano para nadadagdag.
Nagtatabi din po kami syempre, pakonti-konti para sa aming mga bayarin. Sa awan naman po ng Diyos, nakakaraos po kami.